Today we're going to cover how to do an easy graffiti straight letter piece. The same principles will work whether you're doing this on a wall, on a piece of paper, on stickers like I'm doing, or really wherever you choose to put it. So the first step is we're just going to write our letters out very simply. And we're spacing them evenly on whatever surface we're doing. So if it's a wall, take some steps back and look at it a few times to make sure that you're evenly spacing these out across the wall. Or if you're doing a piece of paper, we're just evenly spacing it out across the surface. Next, we're building our letters. So we're doing this using rectangles, and we're just shaping our letters and thickening them up. I have individual letter tutorials on my page if you want to check those out. But basically what we're doing is using a rectangle for each section of each letter and kind of turning it into like a bubble letter or a straight letter. You can see for the A and the E, I divide those all up into rectangles pretty much. The backbone of the E has a bit of a curve to it, but otherwise rectangles. The S is a little bit more difficult to do. You kind of have to play with it as you're going along, but obviously your letters will be different than the letters I'm doing. But we're just shaping them using rectangle-like shapes. So for the rounded part of this R, we're just playing with it. You'll adjust it a few times just to give it a squared off feel, kind of. The next step is just filling it in. Now when you're filling it in, whether you're using markers or spray paint or whatever medium you're using, what you want to do is fill it in all in the same direction. So we're not going to go up and down and then sideways and up and down and sideways. You can see what I'm doing here. You just go all back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And if you're using spray paint or markers or whatever the case is, this will give it a much cleaner fill. Even if you're doing like a dusty fill with spray paint, this will make it look a lot better than like the messiness of up and down and back and forth and all over the place. So it's the same motion to fill it in. Next, we're outlining. And when you outline, you want to kind of take your time with this. You don't have to rush through it, just outline as cleanly as possible. The way I'm doing it here is I'm having the first letter overlap the next letter, and then that letter overlap the next letter, and so on. But you can switch it up and kind of make it more complex if you want to. If you wanted to have, for example, like the bottom part of the S overlap the E while the top of the E overlaps the S, you can do that. Or if you want the bottom of the S to overlap the R while the top of the R overlaps the S, you can do that. And that'll make it a little bit more complex if you want to go that route. But the easiest way to start is the way that I'm doing it here, where I'm just each letter overlaps the next letter. Now when we're done outlining, next we're going to do our cutbacks, which are one of my favorite tools as a graffiti artist to really make my pieces crisp. And so you can do this using spray paint, or you can do it using paint markers. And what we're doing is we're using our fill color, and we're cutting into our outline to sharpen everything up. So you can see how I did it on the A and how I did it on the E. We're just cutting into that black outline at each corner, and we're sharpening it up. This gives it a super crisp appearance, and it makes it look a lot cleaner than if you just stuck with the outline. Now next, we're going to add our shadow. So to add a shadow, you want to pick a light source. In this case, I'm having the light source be in the top right corner, which has the shadow on the left and the bottom of the letters. So we're just going along all our letters, and on the left side of the letters, we're adding a shadow, and on the bottom of the letters, we're adding a shadow. And when we're adding these shadows, like for example, on the bottom of the left leg of the A, we're stopping a little bit from the edge, the same way that a shadow would be. Or here on the leg of the R, you see I stop a little bit earlier, the same way that a shadow would. Now we're adding our highlights. So remember, the light source is in the top right corner, so there's going to be highlights on the top and the right side of the letters. So along all of the right edges and along the top edges, we're adding our highlights. And you can do this using a lighter shade of your fill color like I'm doing, or you can do this using white. There on that S, I messed it up a little bit, so color back over it with my fill, and then I'm going to go back and fix it. But you can see I'm adding the highlights on the top and the right side of all of the letters. Now the final step is we're going to add a force field. That's what I call it, but it's also called a shell or a second outline or double outline. People call it a lot of different things. I used to call it a shell until I moved somewhere else, and everyone here calls it force filled, so whatever you want to call it. But we're using a contrasting or complementary color, and we're just going around the whole exterior of the piece with that color to kind of add this second outline. And then I also wanted to add some bubbles on here just to spice it up a little bit, and then we're done. That's a graffiti straight letter.